The moon was on fire. Not all of it, but enough. Thick black smoke rose from 3 different points along the valley floor, and the sky above Cathara 4 had turned an ugly shade of orange. The processing station sat on a low ridge above the valley, its walls cracked and its roof half gone. It smelled like burned metal, and something else, something sharp that made your eyes water if you breathed too deep. Commander Nate Holloway stood near a broken window and looked out at the smoke. He did not say anything, he just looked, the way a man looks when he is counting things in his head and doesn't want to lose the number. Behind him, the station was full of noise. The Thun were arguing. They always argued when things went wrong, and things had gone very wrong in the last 2 hours. The ambush had hit them fast and hard. The enemy had come from the eastern ridgeline, which nobody had expected, and the first volley had taken out 3 Thun communication officers before anyone could react. Now the surviving Thun commanders stood in a rough circle near the center of the room, their long arms moving in sharp gestures, their voices overlapping each other in 3 different languages at the same time. Private Lou Garza sat on an overturned crate near the wall and watched them. He was 22 years old and had only been off Earth for 11 months. He still found the Thun hard to look at, not because they were ugly, but because they moved in ways that did not match what his brain expected. They had 4 arms each, 2 long ones used mostly for pointing and gesturing, and 2 shorter ones kept folded near the chest. Their heads were wide and flat, with eyes set far apart, and when they turned to look at something, their whole upper body turned with them, rather than just their neck. Lou had learned to keep his expression neutral around them. Aliens did not like it when humans stared. Corporal Danny Reeves was not watching the Thun. She was crouched near a cracked viewport on the far side of the room, her cheek almost touching the wall, one eye lined up with the gap in the glass. She had been there for almost 10 minutes without moving. She was looking at something out on the ridge to the north, something Lou could not see from where he was sitting. Nate turned from the window. He looked at the Thun commanders, then at Danny, then back at the Thun. He walked over to the alien officers slowly, like a man with nowhere to hurry to. Vekar saw him coming. Of all the Thun liaison officers assigned to the Human Marine Detachment, Vekar was the one who spoke English best, and the one who spent the most time trying to understand how the humans thought. He was not always successful at this, but he kept trying, which Nate respected. Vekar stepped away from the arguing group and met Nate halfway. "Commander Holloway," Vekar said. His voice had a low vibration underneath it, like a cello string being plucked. "The sub-commanders believe we should pull back to the second position. The ambush has compromised this location, and our numbers are reduced." Nate looked past Vekar at the other Thun. Then he looked back at Vekar. "We are not pulling back," Nate said. Vekar was quiet for a moment. His wide eyes blinked slowly, once. "The engagement is lost," Vekar said. He said it the way someone says a fact, not an opinion. By Thun military assessment, when a forward position suffers this level of... "The engagement is not lost," Nate said. He was not loud about it. He said it the same way he would say the sky is blue. "We have cover. We have a clear line of sight to the valley floor, and we have what we need." Vekar looked around the station. He looked at the cracked walls, the missing roof section, the smoke coming through the gaps. He looked at Lou sitting on a crate, eating a ration bar. He looked at the 4 other human Marines, checking their equipment near the eastern door. "What do you have that changes this situation?" Vekar asked. Nate did not answer right away. Instead, he turned and looked across the room at Danny. She had not moved. Her eye was still at the gap in the viewport. Her rifle was not raised. Not yet. She was just looking. Her right hand rested loosely on the barrel. Her breathing was slow and even. She looked like someone waiting for a bus. Then, she turned her head slightly and looked at Nate. She held up 2 fingers. Then she pointed north, toward the high ridge beyond the valley. Nate nodded once. Danny stood up from her crouch in one smooth motion, picked up her rifle, and walked toward the north exit of the station, without hurrying. She did not say anything to anyone. She did not check in with Nate or ask for confirmation. She just went. Lou watched her go. He had served with Danny for 7 months, and he still sometimes forgot she was in the room until she moved. She had that quality, the ability to become part of the background without trying. Vekar watched her go too, his 2 long arms slowly lowered to his sides. "Where is she going?" he asked. "To work," Nate said. Vekar turned to look at Nate. Then he looked back at the north door, which Danny had already passed through. She was gone. There was no sound of her footsteps. There was no sound at all. "Alone?" Vekar said. "Yes," Nate said. Vekar stood very still for a moment. Behind him, the other Thun commanders had stopped arguing. They were watching the north door too, though they had not understood the exchange. One of the sub-commanders said something in Thun. Vekar answered in the same language. The sub-commander said something else. Vekar answered again, shorter this time. Lou leaned over to the nearest human marine, a stocky woman named Corporal Pat Sully, and whispered, "What do you think they're saying?" "Probably asking why we sent one person out alone into a war zone," Sully said quietly. "And what would you say to that?" Sully thought about it for a second. "I'd say that depends on the person." Outside, the smoke was still rising from the valley. The enemy was down there somewhere, regrouping, getting ready to push again. They had numbers and they had momentum, and they had just hit the coalition hard enough to make the Thun want to run. Nate walked back to his window. He looked out at the ridge to the north. From here you could not see Danny. You could not see any sign that a human being had just walked out into that broken landscape alone. That was the point. The sun was getting lower. The orange light made the smoke look almost beautiful if you forgot what was making it. Nate folded his arms and waited. He was very good at waiting. Vekar came and stood beside him after a while. The alien was taller by about a foot, and the vibration in his voice was different now, lower and slower, which Nate had learned was what happened when a dialects disappear. Just rock and dust and the long shadows of early evening. He did not understand yet, but he would. 40 minutes passed. Inside the station, nobody moved much. The Thun sub-commanders had stopped arguing and were now sitting in a low cluster near the south wall, speaking quietly. Their body language had shifted from urgent to something more like waiting, though it was the kind of waiting that comes from giving up rather than from patience. Sub-Commander Rel had taken over the analysis. He was the most senior Thun officer still operational after the ambush, and he had the kind of mind that needed problems to be organized before they could be solved. He had spread a tactical map across a flat section of rubble, and was going through it step by step, his forearms moving carefully between the sensor feeds and the map markings. Nate watched him from a distance. He did not interfere. Lou was sitting with his back against the wall, his rifle across his knees. He was not sleeping, but his eyes were half closed. He had learned to rest when he could. Danny had taught him that in his 3rd month in the field. She had said, "Rest is not weakness. It is maintenance." Lou had thought about that a lot since then. Rel finished his analysis and stood up straight. He walked over to where Nate was standing near the window. "Commander Holloway," Rel said. His English was careful and precise, each word placed like something fragile. "I have completed a full assessment of our tactical position. I would like to share my conclusions." "Go ahead," Nate said. "Without reinforcement or orbital support, a viable counterattack from this position is not possible. The enemy has reorganized into the lower valley. Their communications relay is active. Their next push will come within the hour, and our current numbers cannot hold this station." Rel paused, then added, "I say this not as a criticism of your judgment. I say it as a statement of fact." Nate listened to all of it. He nodded slowly when Rel finished. Then he turned back to the window. "Thank you," Nate said. Rel waited for more. Nothing came. He was still trying to figure out what to say next when it happened. The sound came from a long way off. It was a single sharp crack, not loud, more like the sound a branch makes when it breaks cleanly. It crossed the valley and arrived at the station a full second after the light, though there was no flash to see, just the sound. Then silence. Rel's sensor panel lit up. He was at it in 2 steps, reading the data as it came in. His eyes moved fast across the display. Then they stopped. He turned slowly to look at Nate. "The enemy communications officer is down," Rel said. His voice had gone very flat. "The individual coordinating the forward push. Their communication signal has stopped. Their unit is no longer receiving coordinated orders." Nate did not turn from the window. He said nothing. Behind Rel, the other Thun had all stood up. They were looking at the sensor display, then at each other, then at Nate. The room had a particular kind of quiet in it now, the kind that happens when people are trying to process something that does not fit. Rel looked back at his sensor panel. He ran the trajectory analysis again. Then he ran it a second time. "The angle is not possible," he said, not to anyone in particular, to himself or to the data. "From any standard position within our perimeter, the angle to that target does not exist. The distance is also. It is outside normal operational range for a single shooter." "It is outside normal operational range for a Thun shooter," Nate said, still looking out the window. Rel looked up. Vekar crossed the room quickly and stood beside Rel, reading the same data. He stared at the distance marker. He looked at the angle calculation. He looked at the position marker that showed where the shot had come from, far up on the north ridge, far beyond where any of them would have fought to look. Vekar turned to Nate. "You sent her out there alone," Vekar said. "To that ridge? That far?" "Yes," Nate said. "How many did you send?" Nate held up one finger. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Rel set down his instrument. He looked at Nate with the expression of someone who has just been told that water runs uphill, and is watching it do exactly that. "I need to understand this," Rel said. He was working hard to keep his voice level. Among the Thun, long-range precision shooting requires a coordinated team. A primary shooter, a spotter to calculate wind and distance, and a third operator managing environmental data and sensor feeds. This is our standard. This is the minimum required for accuracy at that range. "I know," Nate said. "You sent one person." "I did. One person performed the function of 3. Nate turned from the window for the first time in a while. He looked at Rel with a mild expression. "She performed the function of Danny," he said. "That is a little different." Rel did not know what to do with that answer. Vekar looked back at him and offered nothing helpful. "What is her rank?" Rel asked. "Corporal," Nate said. "What unit?" "3rd Marine Detachment, long-range reconnaissance. And her training protocol. I would like to review it. If this level of precision can be trained, the Thun military would benefit from." "Her name is Danny Reeves," Nate said. "She grew up in a place called Montana. It is a region in the western part of North America. High altitude, big open country, cold winters." Rel waited for him to continue. "She started hunting at 8 years old," Nate said. "By the time she was 16, she was making long-range shots at high altitude, in wind that would make your instruments nervous. She has been doing it for most of her life. It is not a training protocol, it is just who she is." Rel was quiet for a long moment. Across the room, Lou had opened his eyes. He was watching the conversation with a small, familiar expression. It was the expression of someone who had explained Montana before, and knew how it usually landed. One of the younger Thun officers, a private who had been quiet all evening, said something in Thun. Lou could not understand it, but the tone was obvious. It was a question. Vekar answered the private in Thun. The private said something back, louder. Lou leaned forward. "What did he say?" Lou asked Vekar. Vekar paused. He seemed to be choosing his words. "He is asking why your species allows its young to practice precision killing as a recreational activity," Vekar said carefully. "He finds the concept philosophically difficult." Lou thought about that for a second. Yeah, Lou said. I get that a lot. He reached into his pack and pulled out his field tablet. You want to see a map of Montana? Might help. The Thuan private looked at the tablet, then at Lou, then at the north ridge outside the window. A second crack came from the ridge, distant, clean and final. Rel checked his sensors. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he opened them. Enemy heavy weapons crew chief, he said quietly. Down. Nobody said anything. Nate turned back to the window. His arms were folded. His expression was the same as it had been all evening, calm and unhurried, like a man watching rain. She will be back by dark, he said. If someone has coffee, leave it out for her. She drinks it cold. Rel stared at him. Lou was already looking for the coffee. She had found the position 20 minutes before she needed it. That was the rule she had kept since she was 12 years old, crouched in the cold grass of the Montana high country with her grandfather's rifle balanced on a fallen log. He had told her, find your spot early, let the ground get used to you, let the air settle. If you move into position in a hurry, you carry the hurry with you, and the hurry will cost you. She had never forgotten that. The ridge above the valley was broken rock and old dust, the kind of surface that gave nothing to stand on comfortably, all angles and loose edges. Danny moved through it the way she moved through everything, slowly, one step fully placed before the next one started. Her boots found solid ground each time. She did not slip. She did not knock anything loose. She had done two things when she left the station. She had counted the smoke columns to fix the enemy's rough position in her head, and she had looked at the way the light was falling, which told her which direction the wind was coming from, before she even got close enough to feel it. Both things would matter more later. The position she chose was a flat shelf of rock about 2 meters wide, partially sheltered on the left by a larger boulder. The boulder was important. It would stop her silhouette from cutting the skyline. Anyone looking up from the valley would see rock. Just rock. She settled onto her stomach, adjusted her body angle until her spine was straight, and let herself breathe for a while. Not thinking, just breathing and looking, and letting her eyes adjust to the distances. The valley below her was long and wide and full of movement. The enemy had not been sitting still. In the time it had taken her to reach the ridge, they had reorganized into a rough formation near the center of the valley floor. She could see vehicles, personnel clusters, and 2 equipment setups that looked like weapons platforms in early assembly. She did not reach for her rifle yet. She watched. There was a man near the center of the largest personnel cluster who was moving differently from everyone around him. The others were moving with purpose, carrying things, checking things, doing what soldiers do when they are preparing for a push. But this man was talking. His hands were up, gesturing, and the people around him kept stopping to listen, and then moving off in different directions. A communications officer. The person making sure everyone else knew what to do and when to do it. Danny studied him for a while. She checked his position relative to the landmarks she had already fixed in her mind. She checked the way the dust was moving along the valley floor, which told her the wind at ground level. She checked the thermals rising off the hot rock below her, which would affect the shot at this range and elevation more than the wind would. She pressed her radio once. Grid 479er, she said. Nate's voice came back 2 seconds later. Confirmed. Now she picked up her rifle. It was a simple piece of equipment, ugly in the way that useful things are ugly. No ornamentation, no extra weight. Everything that was on it was there because it needed to be. She had cleaned it 3 days ago, and she would clean it again when she got back. She always cleaned it when she got back. She found a natural rest for the front of the barrel in a small crease in the rock. She did not need a bipod. The rock was better than a bipod. It did not vibrate. It did not shift when she breathed. She settled her cheek against the stock and looked through the scope. The scope brought the valley close, too close almost. She could see individual faces, individual expressions. She had learned not to think about that. She had learned to think about wind and distance and the small corrections she needed to make for the way a bullet moves through air over a long distance, dropping a little, drifting a little, always telling the truth about physics in ways that felt like small betrayals if you were not expecting them. She was always expecting them. She found the communications officer in the scope. He was still talking. His hands were still moving. She calculated the drop. She adjusted for the wind she had measured at ground level and the wind she could feel at her own elevation, which were slightly different. She added a small correction for the temperature, which affected air density, which affected how the bullet flew. She waited. The man turned slightly, which changed the target angle. She waited for him to turn back. He turned back. She let out half a breath. Not all of it. Half. The old trick, the one her grandfather had taught her before she was tall enough to see over a fence post. Half a breath. Then still. Then the rest is just timing. The rifle moved once. She did not watch the result. She already knew the result. She had done the work, and the work was correct. She kept her eye in the scope and watched the formation below react. That was the important part now. Not the shot. What happened after? The formation fractured exactly the way she expected. People stopped. People looked around. People moved toward the downed officer, and then away from him in confusion. The ordered movement became disordered. The flow of instructions stopped. She did not move. A good shot creates a problem. A good sniper turns that problem into a longer one. She watched the enemy find someone to take over. She watched the new person try to pick up the communication thread. She gave him 40 minutes. She watched him find his footing, start to get organized again, start to fill the gap she had made. Then she made the gap again. The second shot was longer, and the wind had shifted slightly. She had been tracking the shift for the last 20 minutes, waiting to see if it would settle or keep moving. It settled. She took the shot. The new communications lead was down. The formation fractured a second time, worse than the first, because now they knew there was a shooter somewhere, but they did not know where. She had made sure of that by choosing her position carefully and by not moving at any point in the last hour. They searched. She watched them search. Their instruments swept the ridgeline and found nothing because she was below the crest, and the boulder on her left was eating her silhouette. She waited them out. An hour after the second shot, she found the heavy weapons crew chief, the man overseeing the assembly of the weapons platform. Without him, the platform would not be ready before dark. With dark came a shift in the tactical situation that favored the coalition holding the station. She took that shot too. 3 shots, 3 positions of power removed from an organized enemy push. The valley below her was still full of people and equipment, but the people did not know what to do anymore, and the equipment was not pointed in the right direction, and the sun was getting low. She waited until the light was nearly gone. Then she stood up from the rock, eased her joints back into working order, and began the walk down from the ridge. She moved the same way she had moved going up. No hurry, 1 step at a time. She was 40 minutes getting back to the station. When she came through the north door, the room was quieter than it had been when she left. The Thun officers were in a cluster near the sensor panel, speaking in low voices. Lou was sitting in the same spot he had been in when she left, though he had fallen asleep and was just waking up. Nate was near the east wall. On a crate beside him was a metal cup. She crossed the room, picked it up, and drank. The coffee was cold. It was also strong and slightly bitter, which was how she liked it. Nate did not say anything. Neither did she. That was enough. The enemy did not come that night. By morning the valley was quiet. The coalition sensors showed the enemy formation had pulled back 3 kilometers to the south, which was not a retreat exactly, but was close enough to one that it changed everything. The station was still standing. The ground was still held. A resupply shuttle was inbound. The Thun subcommanders had stopped talking about pulling back. Subcommander Rel wanted answers. He had been composing his questions since the previous evening, organizing them the way he organized everything, by order of importance and logical sequence. He had not slept much. He had sat near the sensor panel, and looked at the numbers and the angles and the distances over and over, as if looking long enough would make them make more sense. They did not make more sense. They just made him more certain that he needed to talk to the human. He requested a formal debrief. Nate agreed to it. They sat, or in the case of the Thun, settled into the posture that served them as sitting, near the center of the station. Nate was across from Rel. Danny was beside Nate, her back against the wall, her legs stretched out in front of her. Lou sat off to the side with his field tablet, which he had started using as a kind of visual aid in conversations with the alien officers. Vekar was there too. He had been quiet all morning, which for Vekar was unusual. Rel began. "I have reviewed the engagement data from last evening," he said, his English careful and deliberate. "I want to share my findings so that any errors in my understanding can be corrected." "Go ahead," Nate said. The first shot was taken from a distance of approximately 1,340 meters. The target was a moving individual at ground level, while the shooter was elevated by approximately 200 meters. The wind at the time of the shot was variable between the two positions, approximately 12 kilometers per hour at ground level, and somewhat higher at the shooting position. The shot connected on the first attempt. He paused and looked at Danny. Danny looked back at him with an expression that said she was listening. "These numbers are not achievable under standard Thun combat doctrine," Rel said. "They exceed the operational parameters of a single-operator shoot. They require, at minimum, a 3-person coordination team. The data says otherwise. I am asking you to help me understand why." Nate looked at Danny. Danny thought for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was even and unhurried. "The wind was manageable," she said. "I had a good natural rest in the rock. The target had a predictable movement pattern. I watched him for a while before I took the shot. I knew where he was going to be." Rel stared at her. "That is your explanation?" he said. "Yes," she said. Rel looked at Nate as if expecting Nate to offer something more. Nate offered nothing more. "The distance," Rel began. "Was fine," Danny said, not dismissive, just accurate. Rel set down the instrument he had been holding. He pressed two of his hands together in the Thun gesture that roughly meant, "I am adjusting my approach." "How long have you been trained for this?" he asked. Danny considered this. "I started shooting when I was 8, she said. The room was quiet. Vekar, who had been standing to the side, took one step forward. 8 years, he said. Years being the human unit of. Yes, Danny said. 8 years old. Vekar's translation implant processed this. There was a small pause that Nate had learned meant the implant was running the conversion a second time because the first result seemed wrong. That is very young, Vekar said. My grandfather started me early, Danny said. He said if you learn it right the first time, you don't have to unlearn anything later. Rel looked at his data. He looked at Danny. He looked at the data again. 8 years of training, he said slowly, which means by current age, you have been doing this for 19 years, Danny said. More silence. Lou looked up from his tablet. He had heard this conversation before, or versions of it, and he always watched the moment when the number landed on someone who had not heard it before. It was a good moment. It had a particular quality to it. Rel turned to Vekar and spoke in Thun for a few seconds. Vekar answered. Rel turned back. In Thun military training, long-range precision shooting is a specialization that begins at the equivalent of 22 of your years and requires 5 years of intensive instruction before field deployment is considered. You began at 8. Yes, Danny said. As a child, yes, she said again. She did not seem bothered by this line of questioning. She answered it the same way she would answer a question about weather. Rel looked at Nate. Is this normal among humans? Nate tilted his head slightly. Depends on where you grow up, he said. Where Danny grew up, yes, it is pretty normal. Lou pulled up a map of Montana on his tablet, and held it toward the nearest Thun officer. "This is where she is from," Lou said. "See this part here? Big open country, mountains. You can see for a long way, and there is a lot of wind, and a lot of animals that are very good at running away. If you want to eat, you learn to shoot a long way." The Thun private who had asked about it the night before leaned in and stared at the map. Then the secure communication channel opened with a soft tone, and Colonel Petra Okafor's voice came through, calm and professional. "Holloway, status report. Holding the position, Colonel. Enemy has pulled back. Resupply inbound. One operation conducted last night. Results were favorable." "I saw the sensor data," Okafor said. There was something in her voice that was not quite a smile, but was close to one. "Who was on the ridge?" "Reeves," Nate said. A brief pause. "Of course it was," Okafor said. Rel leaned forward toward the communication unit. "Colonel Okafor, I am Sub-Commander Rel of the Thun Coalition. I would like to ask, if this level of individual capability is present in the human detachment, why was it not a primary element of the Coalition tactical planning from the beginning? Why did we not know?" There was a longer pause this time. Sub-Commander Okafor said carefully, "We always bring sharpshooters. It has been standard since before the Coalition was formed." Another pause. No one asked. The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet than the others. It was the quiet of 4 alien officers sitting with a thought that was rearranging something inside them. Vekar looked at Danny. Danny was finishing a ration pack with the focused attention of someone who had not eaten since the previous morning. She did not appear to notice the weight of the room. Vekar watched her for a long moment. "We did not ask," he said, mostly to himself. "No," Nate said. "You did not." Rel looked at his data one more time, then he closed the panel. He did not have any more questions. Or rather, he had too many, and none of them were the kind that data could answer. The resupply shuttle came in low over the eastern ridge just after sunrise. It was a plain, battered thing, gray-white, with scorch marks along the underbelly from a previous hard landing somewhere. It touched down in the flat ground 50 meters from the station, and the loading ramp came down before the engine had fully stopped. 4 Marines came out with supply cases. They moved fast and quiet, the way people move when they have done the same job many times and do not need to think about it. Nate was outside watching the unloading when Vekar found him. The alien had been walking the perimeter since before first light, which Nate had noticed but not commented on. The Thun moved differently when they were thinking hard about something. They got restless. They could not sit still the way humans could. Vekar stopped a few meters away. He looked at the shuttle. He looked at the valley, which was empty and still in the pale morning light. Then he looked at Nate. "I have been trying to find the correct way to ask you something," Vekar said. "Take your time," Nate said. Vekar was quiet for a moment. One of his lower arms moved in a slow circle at his side, the Thun equivalent of someone tapping their fingers while they think. "What is it like," Vekar said at last, "to be your species, to be built this way?" He stopped. Then he tried again. "The Thun have a concept for the distance between being alive and being dead. We consider it large. We put many things between ourselves and that distance. Protocols, teams, systems, layers. We do not like to be close to it." He paused again. "You seem comfortable there, near that distance. You train your children to stand near it. Your soldier went out into that ridge alone, and she was not afraid." Nate was quiet for a while. 2 Marines passed them, carrying a long equipment case between them, talking to each other in low voices about something that had nothing to do with the conversation happening 5 meters away. "She might have been afraid," Nate said. "I do not always know what Danny is feeling. She does not say much about it." "But she went," Vekar said. "Yes," Nate said, "she went." "That is what I mean," Vekar said. "She went regardless. That is the part I am trying to understand." Nate looked out at the valley for a while. We are not built for it, he said finally. I want to be clear about that. Humans are not born without fear. We are not made of different things than you are. We feel what you feel when we are close to that distance. He picked up a small piece of rubble from the ground and turned it over in his hand. But a long time ago, a long time before any of this, humans decided not to look away from it. We decided to learn it, practice it, get familiar with it. Not because we liked it, but because we knew it was there, and pretending it was not there made us weaker. Vekar listened to all of this. Your young learned to hunt, he said. Danny did. The Thun find this troubling, Vekar said. He said it without judgment, as a fact. We see no separation between what you call recreational hunting and what you call combat. To us they are the same act. They are the same act, Nate said. He looked at Vekar. That is the point. Vekar's wide eyes were still. You are saying the training is honest, Vekar said. I am saying we did not pretend, Nate said. We did not train people to shoot at targets that looked nothing like what they would actually need to shoot at. We did not keep the distance clean and comfortable. We trained in the real thing, because the real thing is what eventually comes. Behind them, across the flat ground near the north wall of the station, Danny was crouched beside Lou. He had his field optics out, and she was showing him something, adjusting the way he was holding them, pointing at something in the middle distance. Lou looked through the optics, adjusted, looked again, and nodded. Danny said something. Lou nodded again. Vekar watched this. Rel had come outside at some point and was standing a few meters back, also watching. She is teaching him, Vekar said. Yes, Nate said. What is she teaching him? How to read shimmer off hot ground, Nate said. It tells you about thermals, which tells you how a bullet will move on a hot day at long range. It is a small thing, but it matters. Vekar looked at Danny for a long time. She finished with Lou, stood up, handed the optics back, and walked toward the station entrance, without hurrying. She moved through the open ground with the same quality she always had. Quiet and deliberate, like she was part of the landscape rather than crossing it. She did not look at Vekar or Nate as she passed. Vekar turned back to the valley. I believed, he said slowly, that the human soldiers in this coalition were soldiers who also happened to hunt. That the hunting was a background detail, a cultural note. Nate waited. I think I was wrong, Vekar said. I think some of them are hunters who happen to also be soldiers. The soldier part came after. The other part came first. That is closer, Nate said. Rel walked up and stood beside Vekar. What about Corporal Reeves specifically? Rel asked. He had been listening from a distance, and was not going to let the conversation end without asking. Nate thought about this. Danny is neither, he said. She is not a soldier who hunts, and she is not a hunter who soldiers. She is a woman from a small town in the mountains who learned very young that the world is very large and very honest, and that if you want to be honest back at it, you have to be still and patient, and you have to do the work before the moment comes, not during it. He dropped the piece of rubble. The military gave her a uniform. The mountains gave her everything else. Rel was quiet. Vekar was quiet. From inside the station, Lou's voice drifted out, explaining something to the Thun private about elk migration patterns and why certain valleys in Montana held more animals in late autumn than others. The private's response was impossible to hear clearly, but its tone was clear enough. Nate almost smiled. The coalition moved out, an hour later. The valley that had been full of enemy formation was now open ground, and they walked into it in a long, loose column. Human Marines and Thun soldiers side by side, the shuttle overhead running a survey pass. Vekar walked beside Nate. For a long stretch they did not speak. The valley dust rose around their boots, and the light was good and flat, and the air smelled of the rock that had been baking in the sun all night. You said your species decided a long time ago not to look away, Vekar said eventually. Yes, Nate said. When? Nate thought about this. I do not think there was a single moment, he said. I think it happened the way most things happen, a little bit at a time, in a lot of different places, until it was just part of who we were. Vekar considered this. 50 meters ahead of the column, moving at the same pace, but somehow farther along than anyone else, Dani walked with her rifle slung and her eyes on the horizon. She was not rushing, she was not lagging, she was just ahead, she was always just ahead. Vekar watched her. "Your species invited itself to this war," he said, not critically, with something closer to wonder. "The war invited itself to us," Nate said. "We just decided to show up prepared." The column moved forward through the valley. The dust settled behind them. The sky above Kethera 4 was clear for the first time in days, and the light that fell across the broken ground was clean and even, and showed